In at number 10, we have the Gacha, and the reason why this creature is here is not necessarily that it's bad, and you know, in some ways it kind of doesn't deserve to be on this list, but this creature was said to just be like a must-have, essentially. Obviously, maybe not quite in recent times, but I still think it deserves to be here, as a lot of people were just saying that this was like the best like creature on extinction entirely, without even considering any other creatures. And obviously it had been nerfed, but still I do think, although it isn't as apparent now, it still is pretty apparent, and Gacha still exists. I think people do give the Gachas a little bit more attention than there was. Again, not saying they're bad creatures, they are really good, but just nowadays you don't really need them anymore. Next up, we have got ourselves the Raptor, and this creature, in my opinion, is a really good one, which can be very useful for beginners, but I still think it gets more than it deserves in terms of its press for being a really great creature. Yes, for a beginner tame, it is still very useful, but there are some other great options at that level too, and especially if you're on Genesis Part 2, there are so many options, although on the island you are kind of limited. I'll often skip the Raptor and just wait to get the next best thing up, like a Carno or an Allosaurus or something like that. That will be my first carnivore in the game. And obviously I wouldn't go for a Dialer, and general people wouldn't tame a Dialer, they're not really useful whatsoever, you can't even ride those things. But still, with the Raptor, albeit it is a very useful creature, it's kind of a nerfed version of itself of what it once was, and you know, albeit yes, again, useful for beginners, and you know, it can be quite an easy first carnivore tame. I really think it is overrated, and it doesn't deserve as much as it gets, really. Like, I know Raptor exists and all of that, so Raptors really are a popular creature in Ark. It's just, for me, maybe not so much. Next up, we have the Rock Drake, and some of you may not be liking my decision here, but in my opinion, I have to say that the Rock Drake is overrated, and the reason for that is the Rock Drake is only very useful in more specific cases because of that gliding ability, and although it is an extremely cool creature with a huge wealth of abilities, it's only really useful on maps like Operation, and I know there are exceptions to the rule and certain biomes which give exceptions to the rule, and certain things which make this creature really great on other maps and in other environments. It's not really that useful on all other maps. You can't just have it being extremely useful in like pretty much every case of air travel, where something like a Snow Owl can do that on any map, obviously apart from maps that exclude flyers, but that's such a low percentage of maps. It's only 2 out of the however many main maps there are, if I can, the island, Scorched Earth, Operation, Extinction, General Engine. Like 2 of the 6, yeah, you might say that's a good third, but still, something like the Snow Owl, it's got a lot more edge over this creature, and this creature actually isn't particularly useful on maps like Fjorda and Ragnarok and all of that. It just, the gliding ability doesn't really suit those maps whatsoever, so that's why I think this creature's overrated. In at number 7, we have got the Allosaurus, and this creature really did have to be here on the list. Like, I could not exclude it. This creature, in my opinion, is heavily overrated, as a creature like a Deinonychus is so much better and frankly easier to tame, and it just excels in every place that the Allo can't. The Allo's a lot bigger and bulkier than the Deinonychus, which actually doesn't really play to its advantage, as the Deinonychus's mobility is significantly better than it. Again, I'm not saying the Allo is a bad creature, I was never really fond of this creature, and I'm still not very fond of it, apart from in SOTF. That's the only real like I have for this creature, and albeit, you know, it's got a cool model and all of that, it doesn't do it for me in terms of a good creature. And something like the Deinonychus or the Shadowmane, I know the Shadowmane's not really part of the exception here, because the Shadowmane is like a really difficult tame, and the Allo is significantly easier than it, and on ASA it's even easier to tame than ever before. It's just, I don't know, really, it lacks in something that the Deinonychus has, and I think people talk about this creature too much, and again, it is a great boss creature and it can do loads of things. I'm not saying that any of the creatures on the list are bad, it's just, for me, it doesn't really need to, it doesn't do what I want it to do. I would prefer a bit more power out of this creature, and, you know, maybe, I'm just trying to really think of something that would make this creature better, and I can't, and it's actually partly annoying with this creature because I want to like it, but I really can't, and I have to put it here. Next up, we have got ourselves the Thyla, and again, this is a really great creature, but people talk about it so much, and I know it's not really on a similar playing field, but the Shadowmane is much better of a creature, but on a similar playing field, I would say the Deinonychus is a better creature, essentially doing everything this thing does, but just better, and it can actually go into boss fights as the Thyla can't. It's a better caving creature because of its size. It has a pack buff, which the Thyla doesn't. It doesn't take full damage, and the Thyla does, and although its like climbing abilities, you could say, are actually better on a Thyla than on the Deinonychus, as you don't really have to jump from place to place, they still pretty much do the same thing. And like, people give the Thyla a lot of press, and I know it is a really great creature for the island, and it will get you very far. Again, I have to keep repeating this because someone usually always says to me, oh, well, this creature's not bad, it's a really good creature. I admit that it's a good creature, it's just, I feel like with new creatures that have come out, although the Deinonychus isn't really new, it just doesn't really deserve its pedestal as much anymore as it once did. If this was like back in 2016, then I would probably think differently, but it's 2024 now, so things change. In at number 5, we have got the Desmodus, and this is actually one of my favourites, but I'm putting it here because although Sanguine Elixir is such an OP thing, and Blood Bag farming is great, it doesn't need to be the best art creature just ever in existence, as creatures like the Deinonychus really do pack a huge punch where the Desmodus can't. And although you can't really have a creature that just does everything, this does a lot of it, but still, I don't think when like people say, oh, the Desmodus is just the best creature in Ark, which I actually have heard quite a significant amount, I'm not going to put it in like the top 3 spots, but I still think it doesn't deserve as much as it gets. It's a really great creature. I do completely admit that. It's just, there are some other creatures out there which, in my opinion, are better than this creature and really don't get as much press as it. Next up, we have the Manag, and this was pretty much the go-to PvP creature for most people, and obviously that has died down now, and it pretty much had died down since the nerf of these creatures. I still hear a lot of really good press about the Manag, and there's nothing strictly wrong with this creature anymore. I will admit it is a little bit overpowered still, especially considering its speed, and it kind of does something which no other creature could. But now creatures like the Astrodelphis and the Tropiognathus, you really don't need this creature anymore. And although, you know, it is cool in its own way and it works and its abilities are actually pretty cool, and the fact that they can freeze creatures is like kind of game breaking, because, you know, you could do that to freeze players and just decimate them. They're not really used as much for that purpose anymore, but I still think they deserve a place on this list, because throughout all of Ark's history, and I know this is most overrated creatures in 2024, you're still going to get a lot of people which, in my opinion, are upselling these creatures for what they actually are. In at number 3, we have got the Pteranodon, and I had to include this thing here, and quite a lot of PT lovers probably won't be too happy with me for that, but I really have to, okay? The Pteranodon, albeit a very useful flyer, and probably most people's first flyer in the game, it's just, it shouldn't be, in my opinion. There are just, you should just wait, really. Unless you're playing on official, then it makes sense. Otherwise, it's not worth it. Like, get a Crystal Wyvern on Crystal Isles, sorry. Get a Crystal Wyvern on Crystal Isles. You can even get a normal Wyvern, although that is a little bit of a stretch. You can get an RG. I know, albeit it is unlocked at a later level. You can get a Maywing on Gen 2. That thing's unlocked at level 19. You can get a Snow Owl and all of that. There are so many creatures. You can even get the Bloodstalker if you have the right map for it. But on maps like the island, I'd probably just wait and get an RG. They're ridiculously easy to tame. And you can tame one of those things and then get a saddle for it relatively quickly from drops. Actually, I've noticed there's been quite a lot of RG saddles in drops, and especially on ASA actually. So if you just go around going through drops to find an RG saddle and then tame yourself an RG, which can be a good level, as you can just trap that thing really simply and easily and then have the strength to knock it out, you can have yourself a really great flyer, and there's not really a need for this thing to be here. I know it's a really great flyer for those early stages, and there's not all too much competing with it apart from the Maywing, although that is very map limited. I still think it's a little bit overrated. Actually, maybe quite a bit, because it's in the number 3 spot. Controversially, in number 2 we have the Rhinogatha, and the reason why I say that is people are very on the fence about this creature. Some people will just say it's the best thing, and some people will just say it's the worst thing. So I guess actually that's kind of the opposite of on the fence. I'm just going to say people, it's kind of like a Marmite creature. You either love this thing or you hate this thing, and right now I'm quite enjoying the Rhinogatha. Not on ASA actually, because they spawn so much and they're really annoying, but just if I actually have one, yeah, really great creature. If they're trying to kill me, I don't really like them as much, but I still see a different side to this creature, which is like an absolute PvP god, and loads of people are gonna really love it for that, but I still think it gets more press than it actually deserves in a way. I know it could pick up Rexes and all of that, but I really think there are some better creatures out there which you can use, and I'm also partly saying this because I think wildcards have made this creature overrated in a way. Like, obviously it was a new creature for the island and it was gonna bring something to the map, but I really think it just brings a lot of imbalance to the island, and the swamp biome is now probably like one of the most dangerous biomes in the game at this point. Like, having these things there, it doesn't feel right to me. And obviously once tamed, yeah, they're really powerful, but still they can be tamed pretty easily if you have the right equipment with barely any effort at all. And you know, people give them a lot of credit, but I guess people give them a bit too much credit because they're definitely nowhere near the pedestal of the best Ark creatures ever, especially in my opinion actually. But you know, some people might say this is the best Ark creature and this is the best thing wildcard has ever produced from Ark, and you can be that person if you want to. I'm not, but people have their own opinions. And in number 1 we have the Rex, and in my opinion this had to be here. Okay, throughout all of Ark's history the Rex has definitely been highly valued, not actually quite as much back in the early days because people saw the Spino for really what it was, which is largely just a better creature than the Rex. Although it does lack in the health department compared to the Rex, it still is pretty much better at everything else. It does more damage, it's got better stamina, it's got better weight. That thing can absolutely rip through the map with its speed, and that's something the Rex lacks. And obviously the Rex is probably the most well-known dinosaur in the world at this point. If someone doesn't know what a T-Rex is, you know, where have they actually been living? Under a rock that's unbreakable in Ark that you can't get out of? Who knows? That was a terrible like version of a joke, but either way, maybe someone found it funny. Comment down below if you found that funny. Was that funny or not? I don't know. Improvisation, I guess. Right. Yeah, the Rex, obviously very popular creature, and it would make sense why people really love this creature, and it is a very good boss creature. I will admit I've used these things a lot, but still, actually, especially with the new baby taming method, it really just shows you the Rex isn't all too worth it to wildcard in a sense anymore. Like, they don't value it as one of the best. Like, it doesn't really get any kind of TLC, frankly doesn't really need all too much of it, but its tame method is now just one of the simplest in ASA, and it's just so easy to obtain that, you know, it just seems like wildcard don't view this creature as a strong, powerful thing. So it may be some kind of like underrating, but I think the community definitely overrates it a bit for what this thing actually is. But anyway, that is the end of today's video. Sorry that none of my arguments seem to be compelling today. I'm really bad at making overrated videos, but you know, I guess, did you agree with this list? Did you enjoy it? And what's your most overrated Ark creature? And I'll see you all later.